NASCAR has officially canceled all practice and all qualifying for the rest of 2020. How's it going, y'all? My name is Eric and welcome to Out of the Groove. Wednesday edition of the show. It's a short week because tomorrow night, Cup Series, Thursday night racing at Kansas Speedway. NBC is going to get their crack at a midweek race. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the show, but we have a lot to get to today. NASCAR announced yesterday they are canceling all practice and all qualifying for the remainder of the 2020 season for Cup, for Xfinity, for trucks. We'll talk about that in just a few minutes, but to start with, let's kind of go through almost like a lightning round. We have a lot of brief stories I just want to touch on really quick, give you guys my quick thoughts on. First and foremost, Chad Knaus, crew chief for William Byron, will miss tomorrow night's race at Kansas Speedway. He's on baby watch. His wife is apparently due to have their child any day now, so he's going to miss that race. Keith Rodden, who you may recognize, he crew chief for Casey Kane at Hendrick for a few years, I believe between 2015 and 2017. He will be atop the box for William Byron and will be calling the shots tomorrow night. Best of luck, of course, to Chad Knaus, and of course, best of luck to William Byron and Keith Rodden. Keith Rodden does have one career win as a Cup Series crew chief. It was that 2017 Brickyard win with Casey Kane. Did that in dramatic fashion, so might be an interesting pairing to watch for tomorrow night. William Byron, of course, on the cut line, or actually outside the top 16 at the moment, so every race matters for William Byron. We'll see what happens without Chad Knaus atop the pit box. Next bit of news, NASCAR reportedly had a meeting with Quinn Houff, driver who was involved in that late race caution when, you remember I did a whole video where he pitted from the third lane and came across traffic, wrecked a couple of cars, wrecked himself more importantly, and it was a caution that happened in the middle of green flag cycle, pit stops, would completely change the complexion of the race. It sparked a whole conversation, a whole debate that Brad Keselowski kind of fueled. Anyway, NASCAR sat down, had a conversation with Quinn Houff, as they said they would. If you missed the video I posted on Monday, Brad Keselowski proposed the idea of NASCAR allowing drivers to graduate from one series to the next, or vice versa, even be demoted perhaps for repeated issues. Gave you guys my thoughts on if that's even possible, when or if that would ever be implemented in NASCAR. If you missed that video, go check it out. It was a few days ago, but yeah, that happened. NASCAR also apparently had a conversation with Chase Elliott. They weren't too happy with Chase Elliott going into the stands when they were at Bristol. He admitted to going up into the stands, wearing a mask and everything, to watch the open race before the main show. NASCAR didn't like that too much because drivers are supposed to either stay in their cars, on the infield, or I guess at Bristol, wherever it is, or they're supposed to stay in their motorhomes before the race. They're not supposed to walk around, and they're definitely not supposed to go up into the stands among 25,000 other people. Even if you're wearing a mask, NASCAR did not want drivers doing that. Of course, NASCAR was not too happy either with Chase Elliott fist bumping and high-fiving fans after he won the race later in the evening, which is something I said in my video afterwards that NASCAR should definitely take a look at. I'm surprised they didn't discipline him in any way, but I'm not surprised that they at least sat him down and had kind of a conversation. And from reports, they weren't happy with Chase Elliott doing a lot of that stuff, so not too shocking there. Also related to COVID protocols, Mike Ruck, husband of Angela Ruck, Truck Series driver, was fined $10,000 the other day, reportedly because he brought unauthorized guests, like apparently sponsors, I guess, of the team, into the infield at Texas Motor Speedway during the race. That's something that, since NASCAR's come back from the pandemic, has been outlawed, has not been allowed. Only essential personnel are allowed in the infield, in the garage area, on pit road, and so NASCAR dished out a modest fine to Mike Ruck. You can't make this stuff up. Remember, about 2 weeks ago now, NASCAR sent a memo to all the teams across Trucks, Xfinity, Cup, probably even ARCA. Remember, about 2 weeks ago now, NASCAR sent a memo out to all the teams reminding them to continue to take all the different COVID-19 protocols seriously. Apparently, they're having issues with team members showing up without masks on, social distancing becoming far less frequent in the garage area, and of course, Jimmy Johnson testing positive. NASCAR felt the need to clamp down on this stuff because if there was to be like a pocket or a significant outbreak in the garage, good chance the NASCAR season would be threatened. So NASCAR sent a threatening memo reminding teams that they're going to start dishing out fines for infractions like that. And of course, here we are just a couple weeks later. They already fined an Xfinity Series team. I'm blanking on who it was, but a couple weeks ago they fined an Xfinity Series team owner, and now they fined Mike Ruck. They had a conversation with Chase Elliott. Still a little surprised he didn't face further discipline, but needless to say, NASCAR is trying to take this seriously. And I think with Jimmy Johnson, of course, having to miss Indianapolis a couple weeks ago, I think NASCAR sent them on high alert that they need to really crack down on some of the more lax areas in the garage area. Anyway, that's basically the lightning round. Just want to get all that stuff out of the way first. Let's talk about the big news from yesterday. NASCAR announced that they have canceled all practice sessions and qualifying sessions for the remainder of the 2020 season. This ruling includes the Cup Series, the Xfinity Series, and the Truck Series. ARCA is still expected to run some form of limited practices. I don't know if they're doing it at every single track, but they are doing it at a number of races still. And that includes the Daytona road course here that's just a few short weeks away. Cup, Xfinity, Trucks will have no track time. zero track time before they take the green flag in their respective races that weekend. ARCA, meanwhile, will have a short practice session similar to what they've had at other tracks. This kind of shocking to me. The Daytona road course is not a new road course. In fact, many drivers, especially many Cup Series drivers, have raced on this configuration in some form or another at some point in their careers, but nobody has raced the Daytona road course in a NASCAR sanctioned race car. So focusing on that race specifically, I'm very surprised that NASCAR has canceled all sorts of practice or qualifying. I understand it's a busy weekend, and I'll talk about this more in a minute. I understand there are plenty of outstanding factors, but think back a couple weeks ago when the Xfinity Series ran the Indianapolis road course for the first time. Brand new road course to the series. They had a practice session. In fact, I think they had two. And honestly, I think that's part of why the race was as good as it was. Remember the last 10 laps of that thing with Chase Briscoe making that daring 300? Racing was fantastic. I said afterwards it was maybe the best 10 laps or so of road course racing I've seen in a long, long time. I think having just a little bit of practice before that was extremely important. The fact that there will be no practice for the Trucks, Xfinity, and Cup Series for the Daytona road course, I think just spells disaster. I think either the races are going to be complete wreck fests, or drivers are going to be so cautious because they're going to be scared to make any moves that the race is just going to be boring. I don't have a confident feeling that we're going to see great racing at the Daytona road course. I just think it's risky. But anyway, that is just one specific race. That's just one specific race weekend. It's not that big a deal in the grand scheme of things. But NASCAR announcing that the entirety of the 2020 season will be run without practice and qualifying, I'll be honest, was a little surprising to me. And I can't say I'm a huge fan of this idea. I tweeted this after the news came out. I tweeted, "I just don't get it." And then I followed it up with, "I don't like no qualifying in the playoffs. Stage points in each round are super important. A random draw is going to give some drivers a huge boost in that first stage." And that's really my point. I can do without practice. NASCAR drivers have showed the last several months that we don't need much or any practice to still have decent races. But I was hoping to see some qualifying, especially once the playoffs roll around, because that's really my point. Because from a competition perspective, I hate the idea that the starting lineup for playoff races is going to be determined basically by a random draw. Just going to be dumb luck, especially in the Trucks and Xfinity series where those opening stages are already really short. If you're in the playoff hunt and you draw 11th place starting position versus somebody who you're on the bubble battling with draws the pole position, the guy who got that random starting spot is at a huge advantage to collect max stage points in that first stage, and it's going to automatically put you in a little bit of a hole because you didn't get as many points. But even when it comes to the Cup Series specifically, where the first stage is usually pretty long, usually a pit stop is needed at some point in that first stage. Still, we've established at tracks like Texas or Darlington, which are both in the playoffs, or even the Charlotte Roval, because it's a road course, it's not easy for even fast cars to move through the field. If you're starting back in 12th or 13th, it is not easy to drive your way up to the front of the field in just one stage. I just think in the playoffs, when each round is basically a shortened 3-race season, I just think individual points are way too important to leave the starting lineup up to a completely random draw. I'm not a fan of that from a competition perspective. Now, Scott Miller, NASCAR VP of Competition, did have this to say yesterday. NASCAR will adjust the starting lineup draw procedure for the playoff races and will announce the new process at a later date. So that's at least somewhat encouraging, but more than likely it's still going to be determined in some way randomly, which I'm not a big fan of, but I will at least hold my breath. I will at least keep my fingers crossed that maybe NASCAR is able to come up with a less randomized process. Maybe do like a short iRacing heat race with all the playoff drivers and just have that dictate the results for the race. That, I mean, hey, bring this whole year full circle. I don't know, maybe that's far-fetched, but I'm at least encouraged that they're going to work on something. They understand that the current random draw process likely needs to be adjusted because points are just too important in the playoffs. So I'm at least happy to hear that. I do see the other perspective. There's a point to be made that by not having practice, not having qualifying, teams these days don't have to bring a backup car to the racetrack. They don't have to have a whole nother car prepared, which means less time at the shop, which we already know with social distancing and everything, it's not easy for teams to go and work at the cars at the shop as much as it used to be. And also, especially when it comes to like smaller Xfinity or truck teams or even some Cup teams, not having practice, not having qualifying means less laps on tires. So you're burning through less tires, which are expensive. You're putting less miles on your engine. I've talked to drivers like Tommy Joe Martins before who expressed that, hey, we are saving money by not running practice, not running qualifying. I've talked to Truck Series drivers like Jordan Anderson. They are saving money by not running practice and qualifying. But both of those guys I just mentioned also admit that they do feel like they're at a slight competitive disadvantage by not having practice once the actual race begins. I understand that right now during a pandemic, when businesses across the country are closed or have had to close for certain periods of time, some businesses are still closed, some businesses are permanently closed, unfortunately. I understand that finances are tight. It's difficult to bring in sponsorship. I'm sure a lot of sponsors in NASCAR right now don't feel like they're getting the most bang for their buck because there's not fans at every race. They're not able to do a lot of their at-track promotional stuff. It's all what you see on TV, and that just limits you. That limits what money is coming in and what funds are available. I get that times are tough, and I understand that some things need to be sacrificed for the sake of keeping teams financially afloat through this year. And if NASCAR were to start holding the qualifying sessions, teams would also probably need to bring in maybe a couple other crew members and would have to, pay for them to travel, pay for food, like all that type of stuff to help them set the car up between qualifying trim and race trim. And of course, that would also take time. If NASCAR's really trying to do one-day shows for the safety and health of all their competitors, I mean, say you have qualifying in the morning, you then have to have at least a couple hours for then all the teams to switch their equipment over and pass inspection for, race inspection before the race actually starts. So there's time, there's resources, there's people involved. You'd have to bring more people into the garage area, more people than NASCAR probably wants to bring. And of course, that will be an additional expense to all of the race teams. And there are some teams that can handle it better than others, but it's clear right now, many teams are not doing as well financially as they'd like to be, as they typically would be doing during a normal NASCAR season at this point. So I definitely get both of those perspectives. From a competition point, I'd like to see at least qualifying, especially when the playoffs roll around, because I just believe starting position is extremely important in determining who gets those opening stage points, and that can be extremely important in determining who moves on from round to round. So from a competition standpoint, I really was hoping NASCAR would be able to do some sort of qualifying. But from a business perspective, I completely get why a lot of teams are fine with not having to spend the extra cash to run practice, to have extra crew guys at the track, to do all that type of stuff. I get it as well. This year is kind of a survival year for not just NASCAR, but for businesses around the country and around the globe. And of course, there's always the health and safety component of it. If NASCAR wanted to start holding practice and qualifying, it'd be difficult to do all that in one day. So you're talking about 2-day weekends, 3-day weekends, where teams and drivers have to stay overnight. And NASCAR, for health and safety reasons, has been trying to limit that as much as possible. So there are a number of factors involved. I'm just saying I'm disappointed because I was hoping to get some form of qualifying because I believe it would make the competition in the playoffs just more fair. I understand that these are unprecedented times and some things have to be sacrificed for. But that being said, I was disappointed to read the news yesterday, but I get why NASCAR made the decision. I can still be disappointed by it. Just the whole situation sucks, obviously. Anyway, let me know what you guys think. Are you okay with NASCAR canceling practice and qualifying the rest of the year? You could say it's livened up the beginning of a lot of these races with the random draws, in some cases inverts. Racing has been pretty entertaining. A lot of drivers have to scramble with the handle during the course of a race. It has been pretty entertaining. There's a real argument to be made in favor of limited practice and limited qualifying, but what do you feel about NASCAR's ruling yesterday? And also, would you like to see maybe some form of practice for at least the Daytona road course, a completely new challenge to many of these drivers? Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. We do have one other thing to briefly hit on. It is Wednesday, but tomorrow night, as I mentioned, the NASCAR Cup Series will be racing at Kansas Speedway. Of course, I'll have a video up probably late in the evening after the checkered flag drops. But the reason this race is interesting is because it's NBCSN and NBC's one and only midweek race on the 2020 schedule. Fox, of course, has had several midweek races on their schedule this year as a result of the pandemic. They've all been aired on FS1, and unfortunately, many of them have been affected by weather. In fact, one race was postponed a full day, so FS1 never really got a great, clear metric as to how successful midweek races were. One thing is for sure, though, even though those races were largely affected by weather, the TV viewership for all those FS1 midweek races was consistently lower than your average Sunday afternoon NASCAR race, even on FS1, like comparatively. So midweek races may face an uncertain future, but I think it's interesting. I think it's kind of cool that NBC was kind of willing to run this race as a midweek race just to kind of maybe get their own metric on what midweek races look like for NBC. Fingers crossed this one is not affected by weather and we can get a really clear idea as to if midweek races perhaps have a place in NBC's schedule going forward. I applaud NBCSN's willingness to experiment in a year that's been full of just experiments left and right. I appreciate that. It'll be interesting to watch. Fan response to the midweek races has been, I think, pretty positive, just hasn't brought in the massive numbers that NASCAR's used to seeing on Sunday afternoons. So we'll see what the race does tomorrow night. It's Kansas, put on a decent show last year. Another mile and a half, though. This kind of long, drawn-out period here of intermediate tracks has been getting a little stale, but well, it is what it is. I like Kansas. I'll be watching, but that's all I've got for this episode. Thank you all for watching. Subscribe if you are new. We talk about NASCAR almost daily on this channel. Follow me on Twitter, follow me on Instagram, and of course, a big thank you to my Patreon supporters. Once again, a huge shout out to all of you who support the channel, support the videos on Patreon. It really means a lot to me. If you also want to be a Patreon supporter, supporter of Out of the Groove, check out that top link down in the description. I greatly appreciate it. I've been working on some other videos the last couple of days, but I severely underestimated how long it would take to develop and edit and put some of these things together. So expect some other videos here in the next few days, some other maybe slightly different videos. Keep an eye on some fun live streams coming out fairly soon as well. But thank you all for watching. I'll see you again really, really soon. Have a great rest of your Wednesday. Hope the race tomorrow is fantastic. See y'all.